Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Barbara Tien and delighted to welcome you back to our Speaker's Corner, this wonderful series started by our distinguished member, my collaborator now on Projectkin, Jennifer Jones. The idea was to come up with a way that we could welcome our own members to share their own stories live. And for any member that would like, and maybe even automatically, I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet, we'd be delighted to share your video so you can treasure it and keep it as a legacy for your own family. So with that, let me pause, step off the soapbox, our little virtual soapbox, and turn it over to Jennifer Jones, who will introduce today our topic and today's guests. Go ahead, please, Jennifer.
Thanks, Barbara. So I'm Jennifer Jones from Tracking Down the Family and now Goldfields and Family Ties. And I'm your host today. So Speaker's Corner is a monthly event where we invite two family historians to come along and jump onto our virtual box, as Barbara pointed to, and tell us a story from their family history or from their research. Today I have two guests. I have Bill Moore from Bill Moore's Family History. Bill Moore's Family History, that's it. And Aryn from Genealogy by Aryn. So we're covering both sides of the country. Bill's from New York and Aryn is coming to us from Los Angeles. So each month we will have a theme and the speakers will choose their own topic that suits that theme. So our theme for this month is Women in Our Family Tree. So I'm sure we all know the difficulties of researching the women in our families. The other thing that I'm sure we all know is that it's worth it to spend the time to do that research because often there are amazing stories to find. The females in my family I would consider, or some would consider probably, to be very ordinary. They live quiet, ordinary lives, but I think of them as being extraordinary. My great-grandmothers were all at home raising large families, often living in basic accommodation, often tents, doing their washing in the river, and they were just pioneering their way in the new country. They didn't have our mod cons and everything was, I consider, hard work for them. On top of that, they worked, as they were working hard, their children, they were mourning their babies and children who had died in these large families. So I think we owe them a huge debt. So Billy's going to share with us his experience of researching his great-grandmothers, his successes and his frustrations. And Aryn is coming at the theme from a completely different place by telling us about the witch trials. When I heard about Aryn's topic, my first thought was that I knew nothing at all about the true story of the witch trials. I'm a big fan of historical fiction and I've read quite a bit of quite a few novels about the topic, but I'm looking forward to learning the truth about this topic from Aryn. So Aryn, I'll hand over to you now to tell us your story about the witch trials.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. Well, there are two different witch moments that people know about. There are the witch trials that were Salem, and then there were the witch hunts, which started much earlier than that, about 200 years earlier than that in England. And it all began with the printing press. And Gutenberg created a printing press which took the written word out of monasteries and castles and monarchies and gave it to the people. And within 40 years of that being accessible to the people, a book called The Hammer of the Witches was published. That's not the Latin for it. I don't have it in front of me, so I apologize for that. But the book is significant because of two reasons. First off, 50 years before that, this book would never have been published because it would not have been published by the church or by a monarchy. It was just published by a man who had a great belief in witches. Secondly, around the same time, there was a worry of witchcraft happening in Europe. And the Pope Innocent, had written a bull and he sent it out to the different cardinals and priests saying, be wary of this. Well, the author of The Hammer of the Witches put that bulletin inside his book, which gave it credibility. And it just lit a fire because when people found the book, they saw Pope Innocent's name in it, assumed that everything that was said was Catholic doctrine, and it just went crazy. Everybody's fears were validated, and then people started accusing mainly women of witchcraft. And that's what the tie is into our family history. Because of the great witch hunts, there are massive holes in our family history research, especially if we start with the United States, looking at the Salem witch trials in 1692. Uh, During the trials, 19 people were hung, but hundreds of people were accused. And out of fear, a lot of people changed their names, moved away, or they were just erased. So that's what I've been working on. And I have a three-part piece on genealogy by Aryn, my Substack, that talks about it in more detail.
Yeah. Aryn, are you planning to continue with that on your Substack? Is there more to, that you're planning to the story? Because I've been fascinated reading it.
Well, thank you. No, I have a new piece that I'm starting on, but I think besides the family history, but it all goes back to family history for me,
Yeah.
is just how long the tentacles of the witch hunts, because the Hammer of the Witches, it was 1487 was published. The Salem witch trials was 1692, and in 1735 the British Parliament passed a bill saying that you couldn't hunt women like this anymore. And that last time that was enacted was in 1942 during World War II.
Yeah.
It's just the length and the distance that one printing still affects us, still affects so many aspects of our life, so many aspects of our ancestors' life. It changed how women were allowed to work. It removed hundreds of years of knowledge, especially in places like Scotland, where the witch trials were very intense. I want to say it was like 80%. It was the numbers in Scotland were higher than anywhere else. And Scotland's not a large place. So the amount of people who were being accused went from women who were midwives, doctors, apothecaries, all of that, and removed all of that knowledge. So then when you start looking at our modern history, you'll see things like in 1898, this lady became the first doctor ever, but it's not the truth. It's just the first time women were starting to be allowed to be doctors again because they did all that before.
Yeah.
And that was part of the witch hunt. So all of that information, all of that knowledge was removed and everything shifted over to the patriarchy and to men taking over those roles, which also, you could see in our family history because it is so difficult to find women. They're not recorded.
Yeah.
People only talk about them after they've been married. They don't talk about maiden names. If they don't get married, they completely vanish.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But no, the next big topic I'm talking about actually kind of goes hand in hand. It's the satanic panic ritual that happened in the 80s and the 90s.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That sounds
Which
great.
had the same feeling of panic that was really baseless.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you say, Scotland being a small country, it must have been huge there for the hunt for the witches.
It was.
Hunting the women down and yeah.
And it was much more intense than anywhere else. Where like the numbers in Scotland are they're staggering. And I regret not having my computer in front of me right now so I can read it off. But it's like combined. You can combine other countries and still more people died in Scotland. And it was very systematic. King James VII of Scotland or King James I of England, which is what he became. He very much believed in demonology. He was fascinated by witchcraft. It was very thrilling to him. He wrote his own book about it, but he
Yeah.
also used it to consolidate his power. So he was accusing people who didn't agree with them. He was accusing anybody who got in his way, which is why the numbers are so very high.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I've got a lot of quite a few missing women in Scotland. So you've made me sort of think there. Have you got any suggestions about where you would go to, research this?
I would look at records, court records, trial transcripts.
Right.
Even if your ancestor wasn't accused, um, they may have been questioned and
Yeah,
they may have been put on. Salem is a really fantastic example of this because people who made accusations against other women or men in Salem had to go and give their testimony. So their names were written down. So even if your ancestor wasn't one of the 19 or wasn't ever put in prison, chances are their name's going to pop up because they gave testimony
yeah,
at
yeah,
that time.
yeah,
And also look at land records
yeah,
because a lot of the consolidation of different portions of land, that's what happened during this. So people would get accused because they wanted their property. So you
yeah,
could see the name transfers on the property.
yeah, yeah. Okay, that's good. We'll come back with questions at the end after Bill talks, if anyone has any questions. So we might, that's your information there, Aryn. Yeah, anything else you want to say now? Yeah. All right. We'll come back to you after Bill. So we'll hand over to you now, Bill. Tell us about your great-grandmothers.
Sure. Well, I'm going to talk here about two of my great-grandmothers. One I've got a ton of information on, one not so much. If you've followed my stories on here, I wrote a couple of stories early on about my great-grandmother, Sarah Ellen Ingham Boardman, or Morny, as we called her. She was a very remarkable woman, very very intelligent. Graduated from school early. Actually, graduated from high school with a college degree, which wasn't a common thing back in the early 1900s. But she went on. She taught school a little bit, and she married my great grandfather, who became an oil man, and helped him establish the business. She didn't really work in the business, but she, certainly held up the social aspect of things. He was active in a lot of organizations, and she was right there with him. And she seemed to be in every woman's organization in Wichita Falls, Texas, at that time, which is one of the ways I was able to get a lot of information on her, because pretty much at least once a week she appeared in the newspaper, not as Ellen, which was the name she went by, but as Mrs. L.L. Boardman, because women weren't allowed to use their names. They had to, once they got married, they belonged to their husbands apparently. But she was always in the papers, hosting something or giving a talk somewhere. A lot of things about work that she did with her church. So anyway, as before too many years passed, Lester, her husband, had built up his oil business. He owned a refinery, had a bunch of gas stations. Actually, had gone into the oil drilling business also. So they had some oil wells. He was killed in a car accident. Marnie was left with a son. I think my great uncle Larry was maybe 3 when his dad died, and she had to take over running the company. So she, became an oil executive for a few years. When she found out that neither of her older children, my grandmother and my great aunt, neither one had any interest in running an oil company. So after a couple of years, she sold the company and went into the home building business. She owned a good bit of land and got it platted out, had the streets built and all the utilities and things put in, and built homes on very large lots. And this was during the Roosevelt administration, when they were encouraging people to build, victory gardens, basically, try to grow as much of their own food as they possibly could. And so she built homes on lots that were large enough to do that. Her own house was in one of the neighborhoods that she worked on. She built it on a double lot and had a huge garden and fruit trees and nut trees, and it was quite a place. But, went into businesses that women at that time didn't typically go into. And she was very well respected. My great-grandfather on, still on that side of the family, but basically his son married Marnie's daughter, my grandmother. He had a lumber business and built homes also. And they partnered together. He always spoke very highly of her and of her business sense. And she definitely had great business sense. But at any rate, I have a lot of information about her. She lived until I was in college, so I knew her very well, and spent time with her one summer, week or so. But Wichita Falls, Texas, for any of you who don't know, is not the most hospitable place in the summertime. Definitely not someplace I would go on vacation now in the summer. It's it gets up into over 100 degrees pretty much every day. They have a bicycle race there called the Hotter Than Hell 100, and that's pretty much describes the city. But if you went to visit Marnie and were there for more than a couple of days, you worked. You got out and worked in the garden, mowed the lawn. So it was an interesting time, but still one I wouldn't trade for anything.
Yeah.
On the other hand, on my father's side, his grandmother, she's she's very difficult. The first record I have of her at all was the 1910 census, which was 3 years after my grandfather was born. So I don't have any record of her birth. No idea who her parents were. Don't have a record of her marriage. It did say on the 1910 census that they'd been married for 10 years. So, I guess she was married sometime around 1900. But other than that, I don't really know a whole lot. Other records that I have on her, after 1910, the next census she appeared on was 1950.
Oh, gosh.
After my great-grandfather had passed in 1938, and she went to live with my grandparents in Corpus Christi, Texas, through the mid-40s and 50s. So she was on the 1950 census as living with them. One place I did find her was in city directories. Those are a really good resource. If you can't find someone anywhere else, look at a city directory. You might find them then. I find them there. So I found her in 1940 living in San Angelo, Texas, with my grandfather's sister. 1944, she was living in Corpus Christi with my grandparents, working at a book and stationery store. And then in 1946, she was managing a toy store. And then 1950, she was back in San Angelo living with her daughter again. And then she died in 1951. So I do have a death certificate for her, but didn't really give me any information that I didn't have before. But Kathy Stone put a remark on here that said she's seen many news clippings and obits that don't give the wife's name, just his wife. That was true with Catherine. When my great-grandfather died, his obituary listed, their two children and the grandchildren, and then referred to her as the wife. Not even his wife, but the wife. No mention of her name, but they had I think an interesting relationship. He worked with the railroad, so he moved a lot, and I suspect that there were long periods of time where he wasn't in the household, and that may be part of why it's so difficult to find actually both of them in census records, because he would be out working someplace where they were putting in a new railroad station, living in a hotel or something like that. She'd be back with the kids, and they neither one seemed to be all that interested in being found. But so she was a hard case. I'm still hunting. I haven't given up on her, but her maiden name was Brownlee, not spelled with L-E-E, but L-E-I-G-H, which is an unusual spelling of the name. When I try to look for that, there's a Brownlee neighborhood in St. Louis, Missouri. And so when I try to Google anything with that name, I get a whole lot of houses, but very few people with the name spelled that way. I've seen evidence that that is the way she spelled it. Actually, one kind of interesting thing, one place where I definitely have her name. My uncle was going into the military in World War II, needed a birth certificate. Well, he was born at home, and apparently his birth had never been registered. So they had to do a delayed birth certificate on him, which in Texas required finding someone who had been present at the time of his birth to testify that yes, that is him, this is who his parents were. And apparently they didn't have anybody or didn't want to bother anybody. The person testifying to that was not supposed to be a member of the family. Well, Catherine just signed her maiden name to it, saying she wasn't a member of the family, and they got someone to notarize it and submitted it, and he got his delayed birth certificate. But that's the only place I actually have seen her maiden name on something that on an original source. So I have to take it that was the way she spelled her name. But other than that, she's a hard case.
Yeah. Lucky she was feisty enough to do that, Bill. At least it was a record for you.
Right. Yeah. That wish she'd done a few others. I've never found birth certificates or any record of birth for my grandfather or his sister, other than on that one census.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that ties all four of the members of the family together. She was a good bit younger than my great grandfather. He was born in 1861. She was apparently born in 1886. So she was very young when she had her children. But I've always wondered if there was a story there somewhere, but haven't really been able to find anything out about that, and have no idea where where he might have met her. On the 1900 census, he was living in New Mexico, and his younger sister was living with him. And he was working on a railroad station there. But that was supposed to be the year that they got married. I don't know if his sister introduced him to Catherine, or what the story might be. But they apparently got married sometime after the census that year. But maybe one day I'll find her, but I haven't yet.
Yeah. Put it on that long list of questions that you'd like answered.
Oh yeah. And I have a spreadsheet where I've got all the records that I'm looking for, and whether I found them or not, and put notes. I keep that handy and update it if I find something new. But it's hard for people that moved around as much as they did with the railroad. For example, I know they lived in Houston, Texas at one point. Never found them on a census. I found a couple with similar names, but the ages were wrong. But there again, city directories. I found them there. And my grandfather had told me that they had lived in Houston when he was young. So I knew that. But by the time the next census rolled around, he apparently had gone on somewhere else with the railroad. And she may or may not have gone with him at the time. I'm not sure they even lived together back around the time that he died, because the obituary referring to her as the wife. But he died at my grandfather's house in a little town called Rankin, and apparently she was living with their daughter in San Angelo, Texas, which wasn't all that far, but she was one place, he was the other. So I'm not 100% certain that they actually were together as a couple at that point.
Yeah. There's probably a great story behind all that to know one day.
Oh, I'm sure there is. I wish I could get a little deeper into it.
Yeah. Did she have children other than your?
Just my grandfather and his sister.
Oh, right.
And my grandfather. Yeah. Then he had one sister that was a few years older. She has some. Yeah. Has had a couple kids, but.
Yeah. Oh no, it's very interesting, and I think also Marnie, she's an incredible story, and what a feisty woman she was.
Oh, she was. She was a lot of fun to visit with. Other than the fact that she made the best peach and apricot preserves that you ever had in your life, that we would always go home with, and boxes of pecans and black walnuts. And, we had a lot of fun visiting her. She did have her quirks. She watched every penny. Really was pretty cheap. And my mom was actually on the call with us. She tells a story about us going to visit, and Marnie would wait until she thought everybody was asleep, and her house only had air conditioning in the living room. So when she thought everyone was asleep, she would sneak into the other bedroom and turn off the fan to save a few cents on the electric bill. Yeah. But my great aunt said that Marnie would give her a grocery list and a stack of coupons from stores all over town, and you know, would have cost her more in gasoline to go to all those stores than she was going to save on those coupons. But but you know, she would do it, and she would want to see the receipt to make sure that she got the discounts. But she you know, but we would have a good time. She liked to play cards, played canasta, and we're pretty sure she made up most of the rules, and because they seem to change from year to year. But but she had a good time. It was a lot of fun. She had a great laugh, and but was by the same token she was a very religious woman. Was well, a big part of the money behind one of the churches in town, split off from the First Christian Church there and built a new church, and she was on the fundraising committee and donated a lot of money, we're sure. But like when we would go to visit, pull a card and have to read the Bible verse.
No.
But you know, it was we always looked forward to visiting with her.
I think you're really fortunate to have such memories of a great grandparent.
Yeah. When I was born, I had a couple of great grandparents around too. There are pictures of them holding me. So we well, you know, good Southern family. The women married off and had kids at a young age, and so you had more generations available.
My grandchildren have a or up until not so long ago, 2 great grandparents. Great, and I often think how lucky they are. You know, and I know when I went to school, when I was young and went to school, I had, you know, my 2 great grandparents, and I thought everyone had great grandparents, and I found a lot of the kids at school didn't even have grandparents. So
right.
Very fortunate. When you're talking about names there, it just reminded, when we look at our newspapers here, in my family, most of the obituaries say Mrs. So-and-so died.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, you know, Mrs. Jones or Mrs. whoever, they don't give her the honour of a first name, you know. And my own mother, and so it doesn't go back that far, never, ever did I see her write, even today, and my father has passed away, write her her own Christian name. She's either Mrs. Thomas Lloyd Jones or Mrs. T.L. Jones. I think, well, there's a research glitch there immediately, isn't there?
Well, and Marnie did the same thing. Even after Lester, her husband, died, anytime she signed anything, it was Mrs. L.L. Boardman. You know, she didn't sign anything Ellen Boardman, or and certainly not Sarah Ellen Boardman. She didn't particularly care for Sarah, but yeah, it was, and her friends, you know, she always referred to them as Mrs. So-and-so. You know, and you know, we were expected to do the same. But yeah, it's but with Catherine's obituary, when she died, the little bitty obituary that ran in the paper in San Angelo didn't say Catherine Moore. It said Mrs. Moore.
Yeah. Makes research difficult, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you Google searches, it helps when if you list the children and find them as the survivors. Sometimes that's what it takes to find some of those people.
Yeah. Oh, Kathy, you had a question?
Just a comment, and partly while Bill was talking, is about having information on one great grandparent and not the other. Is that we don't have a lot of information about our grandparents on my mother's side, but the client I've been working with, because my client's mom saved everything, we have so much information on her mother's side of the family and practically nothing on her dad. Like, we know her father, that his dad was a barber from Hungary, and that's about it. And again, it's not my job. I'm not a genealogist. I'm a photo organizer. Not my job to do the ancestry, but I would love to. But this whole talk about women's names, that was the comment I made, because just yesterday I'm sorting stuff, and it was a newspaper article that was in my client's great grandmother's scrapbook that has been digitized, and I was just trying to read what the article said. And it was my client's dad, and it was talking about Mr. or his first name Theodore, and was golfing because they were big golfers, and it was identifying the people in the picture, and it was Theodore and the guy that was the famous golfer, and then it just said and Ted's wife. It was, and eventually she appears everywhere for many years, and they were married in 1931. And also, Bill, we have to talk later, because they were big in the oil industry in Texas and all over the States too. So it just sparked something. But eventually, in her elder years, my client's mom wrote a book, and it dawned on me as we were having this conversation. Her book was called "My Name is Lola." I've always wondered about, but now I'm thinking maybe because she was quite a forward thinker in her day, and she did a ton of stuff. She was a huge philanthropist. They eventually settled. They came to Calgary for 2 years in 1941 and stayed here the rest of their lives, and became huge philanthropists here. They were involved in and she was the chairman and the leader in golf, in charity, and children's things. And I just dawned on me there. I thought, oh, I bet there was a message behind the title of her book. Now I have to look at that further. But it struck me as interesting, that the point that you were making, Aryn, about hard to find the names of women sometimes. And it just dawned on me, and I went, yeah, that was something I noticed going through, like, all the stuff, because they lived all over and they had big families. And I was like, yeah, that was because it drove me nuts when I was trying to figure out who was who in the photos, trying to tie. We need the genealogy, the background to figure that out. And it was like, oh, I wish somebody would have at least put the first name down, because then I would know who they were, like, where do they belong. But it just struck me like, wow, that was very common.
Yeah, it was like that, but women belong to their husbands,
Yeah.
Last year, when Robin Stewart put out the challenge, I think it was Women's History Month, to write each day, I think it was March, about a female ancestor. I thought, yeah, I'll do that, and it'll be really easy because I've written about them all. I'll just link to a post that I've published previously. And when I went back and had a look, because my research has been done over, 40 or so years, so some of it I hadn't looked at for a long time. So when I went back and had a look, I found that the women I'd written about, I had written about them, but in a post as an adjunct to their husband. The post was really about their husband. I thought, oh gosh, I hadn't realised I'd been doing that. So I'm sort of trying to right that wrong at the moment. But I think it's quite, a common thing. Any more questions from anyone? Barbara, you had a question?
Yes. Sorry, I didn't know I was going to be called on. I had a question for Aryn, which still came back to the question of names. In the records, looking at the transcript records for trials, I would imagine that many of these women were not actually married. Some were. Does one look for their maiden name or what? First names?
Last names, surnames.
Okay.
Surnames are a good way to go. Some weren't married, some were widowed. So are you talking about people who were accused?
Well, I think I've shared this before. I have a not direct relation because she didn't have any children before she was hung. But I don't know, I forget how far back in the 17th century, around 1653, I think it was. She was the second wife of one of my great grandfathers, and she was accused of witchcraft and hung. He remarries, and then our family are descended from his third wife. And his first wife died in the transport from England. And so she is only in any of the records that I've seen Lydia Gilbert, and not in Salem, but in Windsor, which happened before
Right.
the panic in Salem. And I have seen some records of it that were third party, write-ups and things like that, but none. I never thought to explore the transcript records, which must be there, that the others have written about it.
Yeah, I would look through the different files. I'm not sure about finding her parentage because, like I said, a lot of people, as soon as accusations were made, people vanished out of fear
Yeah.
that they would
Oh, yeah.
be, even years later, even after
Yeah.
people were exonerated, they would still not come
Yeah.
forward. There were
Yeah.
actually two cases in the United States where the trials happened on the ship coming to the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. You wrote about that.
Yes. Yes. And there were terrible conditions at sea, and someone had to be to blame. And in one of the cases, it was an elderly woman. And in the other case, they think it was a Quaker because there was a big law about bringing Quakers. And if you got caught, the ship captain would get charged. So she was accused of witchcraft.
I'd
And
be
both of the, yeah,
I'd be real
but
interested in
that,
that story, because I do have a lot of Quakers that came
Yeah.
over. So, and many obviously converted once they were here. But yeah.
I have a draft. I'll finish it. But it's very interesting because most of the information, again, is because of the trials. And it really doesn't talk as much about the women who were accused as the captains who were let go and told that they didn't do anything wrong. Um, and when you try to go backwards, because a lot of the people that were coming over, they were leaving not much behind. They were poor, or they were fleeing because of religious persecution. So you have that, that there's not a lot of going to be a lot of paperwork because they're hiding. And then on top of all, they're women, and you don't really talk about women. So, but yeah, there are at least two different that I found. There may be more women who came over and didn't make it all the way over. And then they were, yeah. And in one of them, I can't remember which one, but it was George Washington's uncle was the reason it went to trial, because he was like, this is not right. This should not have happened. And the captain was like, no, this is the way to stop the storm is that we're going to hang this person on the ship. And the trials are
Hang,
really a
she
great
did?
way. Hmm?
Yeah. And did she actually get hung?
Yes, yes, both of the women were executed. Um, and yeah, I think a lot of times when we research women, we tend to avoid things we don't find feminine. And criminal records, we don't find feminine. But just because they have a criminal record doesn't mean they're a bad person or they did anything wrong. It was means that there were accusations made against them. And through history, it is it's just there. Even past the witch trials, when you start looking at sanatoriums and you look at hospitals, women, I mean, Charles Dickens got sick of one of his wives and tried to send her away so he could date somebody much younger. And the judge was like, that's not going to happen. But it was something that happened. Women would get sick of their wives, so they would become institutionalized. And before that, they were witches. And, so there's this pattern. And a lot of time to follow that track is to look through criminal records, imprisonments, trials.
Which reminds me of a follow-up question. You were talking about the British Parliament saying in 1735 something to the effect of, "We will no longer be hunting the witches." And then you make a reference to 1942. What was that about?
In
Or 40
1942,
something?
there was, it was 42, 41. I think she came on trial in 44. Her name was Helen Duncan. She was a known con artist that worked as a spiritual medium. She had a shtick, if you will. She would eat this stuff right before she started talking to people, and then the ectoplasm that showed and proved her connection to the spirits would come up, and she would regurgitate what she had swallowed earlier. But in 1941 or 42, she was having a reading, and she talked about a ship that had been blown up that nobody knew was blown up. The British Parliament did, the only people they talked about that were the people on the ship. So if you lost your child, they got a hold of your family. It was not in the news, it wasn't anywhere. And here she is talking about it. And it's in the middle of World War II, the Blitz is happening. It's not a good time. And they were like, we need a way to get her off the street for more than a little bit. Because she had been arrested beforehand, but it was a small fee and she was back out. But if she was working as a spy, they needed a way to get her hidden away. So if she was working with the Germans or whoever, she was gone. And they enacted the Witch Act of 1735. And that's how they could put her in jail for 9 months. And then after that, that was repealed, and they brought in, like, I think in the 50s, they had put a new ordinance in that helped with con artists and such.
Right.
But yeah, in England, at one point, England became civilized with their witch trials, and they stopped burning witches and they started hanging them. And that's why in the United States, when Salem happens, they brought those customs over of hanging people. If everybody hears witch trials and they automatically assume it's being burned at the stake, but that's France, that's Germany, that's Scotland, but it's not Salem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. And that's picked up. You talked about some of that in your 4-part series.
It's a 3-part series that talks about just the hysteria that came and how it was fueled by whoever wanted to be fueled. Salem is super fascinating because if you actually sit down and look at the history rather than like the pop culture history of it, you start noticing the patterns. And like one of the women who had been accused 10 years earlier because she ran a bar and she didn't go to church and she was very loud and she had as many lovers as she wanted, and that was just frowned upon. And then you start seeing other people being accused, and then the sheriff came in, he was like, I could take all of your stuff. And then it becomes hysterical because he just starts accusing people and backing it up so he could take their houses and their property and whatever. But Salem's very well documented, and you can use it as a case study to research other hysterical moments or other parts of witch hunts. It's a really good outline to use.
Yeah.
That's a great way to look at it. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we're fortunate the times we live in. That makes me realize how lucky we are. Yeah. Just Aryn, did I see in one of your posts, because I'm interested in reading something about this, did you have some books recommended there, or did I imagine that?
No, I have a FAQ at the end of at least 2 of them. I've been trying to add them more with answering different questions directly and offering links so that you can know where to look for different books to read, for different resources that are online. And these posts are free. So you don't have to, you're welcome to do the paid subscription, but they're all free. And even if you want to just scroll to the bottom, you can pretend it's like an internet recipe, just jump to recipe, scroll right to the bottom, and it has all of that different information on there that'll help you find the resources or maybe think outside the box.
Yeah. Oh, I'll do that because I'm really interested to follow up with some reading on this. It's really interesting. Yeah. So we don't have any more questions. Just one last shout out. I think we've pretty much covered it, haven't we? So we will be back next month with another Speaker's Corner, and our guest next month will be Laurie Olsen-White and Diane Burley, and the theme is going to be legacies in our family history. And once again, they will come at it from completely different perspectives, which is, I think, one of the fun things about Speaker's Corner, matching up speakers with the themes. It's a bit challenging sometimes, but it's fun. Yeah. So I would just like to thank you, Bill and Aryn, for being willing to come along and tell your stories. And I think we've probably all learnt something from both of you. Bill with his research tips, and Aryn with a completely different story that I know I hadn't heard of before, other than, as I've said, a fictionalised version. So it's really good to hear about the true side of it. And I am definitely going to follow that up with some reading. And with my missing people in Scotland. So, and by the way, if you're researching your females in Scotland, they use both their maiden name and their married name, usually for most of their lives. So that's sometimes a tip if you can't find, someone under their married name, which you automatically go to after they marry. Yeah. So that's one good thing about Scottish research. Hang on, Kathy says that was wonderful. Thank you, Aryn and Bill, for sharing these stories. And the spark behind this new corner is great. And of course, Barbara for creating such a great space for us. And that's so true. Yeah, this Projectkin event space is really great. Yeah.
You skipped the
so we
part
might
about
wind up
thanking Jennifer. You didn't read the part about
Yeah, I
thanking
know,
Jennifer for this brilliant idea.
Thanks, Kathy.
I caught you there. So
I didn't feel right about reading that out. Yeah, so it's been really great fun, and it's my second one hosting, so it's been fun for me too. I'm a bit more comfortable on Zoom than live, but we'll get there. So thank you, as I said, to Bill and Aryn. We've loved both of your stories. They've been really great, and thanks for being so willing to be involved the whole way through. And thank you all for coming along, and hopefully we will see you next month. Bye for now.
Jennifer.
Indeed. Thank you all. Thank you all. And I get to say thank you, Jennifer.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer and Barbara and Bill.
Hey, let's just keep this going. And remember, everyone, this isn't a short-term thing. We're looking to do this in the long run. So if you've been sort of thinking about it and a little afraid and think maybe you missed it, no, it's okay. We want to hear your stories. Drop a message to Jennifer. Go to projectkin.org/speakers-corner. And read the past stories. Look at that first post, which includes the link to get to Jennifer at Tracking Down the Family. And, we'd love to hear the stories, and practice telling your stories to a devoted, loving audience will prepare you for sharing these stories with your own family. And we're all in for it. And can't wait to hear more. Even our speakers get to come back too, because, there's more of this. So thank you all so much. Take care now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.